Welcome to the J3U University Podcast. I'm your host, John Jewett.
And I'm your co-host, Luke Miller.
Our mission is to elevate the physique coaching standard
and to bring the highest level of competitor to the stage.
Let's jump into today's episode.
Are you having issues growing and reaching the physique that you really want? It's probably not your volume that you're actually training at on the training side. And today, we're going to kind of unpack that a little bit because we've gotten into this information era where we talk about volume escalation and trying to get this volume to extremely high ceilings that we can barely recover from. And in reality, when we start to get into the brass tacks of moving people forward and making sure that we perfect the training side of this, which you guys know that I live, eat, sleep, and breathe, it's not always the volume issue. And I think this is such a big topic to dive into. And training mistakes is so huge. And John, I think we can talk a little bit of personal experience from this because I know we've trained a little bit across both ends of the spectrum when it comes to like high volume pump performance, really low volume, like different times during our careers. And I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah, I think like volume is just going to be this never ending conversation, which it just always comes back up, but it's an insightful thing to share. And a lot of people, I think, start with, it's always what split should I be on in a revamping of their entire training split. And then what gets plugged in on the back end of that is then all the volume. But I think just the start point is what are you currently doing for volume if you're looking to like rearrange your program and get more out of it. And then how does that volume look? Like, how do you quantify it, the quality of it? And I think that's where we've seen so much really shine into the art of coaching, of trying to perfect the quality of this volume. And if you look at the research world and science stuff and you're following that along, it seems just to skim over that piece, and that you look at how far are you from failure, that quantifies that quality of volume, and that's it. And there's just so much more to it, like how you align in that exercise profile. What is the resistance profile? What type of range does that take you through? Like, is there more length and loading in that range? And then what's your ability to brace and take that set to a point of, is it mechanical or is it technical failure? I mean, just the few things that is spouted off there are a lot of things that are going to be defined the quality of that volume outside of just, did you fail or not? And that's it. Like, so there's just so much more to it than that. And that's when, we have clients come through where we're really trying to get them to a point of high quality volume per set. And then, but the volume piece still has to be addressed, right? Like it is a start point. But I think a lot of times people come into this and they're looking at the research like, all right, 10 to 20 sets is a good average amount to work within. I need to get there. And they kind of throw out what they've been doing. You jump into this new volume set, but I don't start there. And I think the assessment of where you at and what is that doing kind of sets up what you should be doing next. Would you agree on that? Is that your start point, Luke?
Yeah, 100%. I think I contextualize the volume they've been training at with the initial assessment I do. It's like the movement assessment and some of the initial sets that I ask for upon onboarding, because it tells me which direction to move them across the spectrum of like where they're at volume wise and the quality of that volume. And so the point here is that I'm never too far removed from where they're actually at. So like if the quality is really low, but they're training extremely high volume, I might dial it back a bit. But the reason that I'm dialing it back is because I know I'm about to like completely revamp the way that they look at executing patterns and getting so much more out of a training set. Just on the flip side, like if their execution quality is really high, but their volume is really low, in order to make more progress for this individual, we're probably going to have to push the boundaries of volume and do it in a way that they can actually recover from it. And so I'm going to be looking at smarter ways to get either higher frequency for that specific body part or for multiple different body parts, higher total volumes across the week. And so where you come from is the parts to know how to move the needle, because they're coming to you to how to make progress. And while we need to kind of, focus on the execution piece, which we're going to get to in a second, because I really want to clarify some things that I think you guys mistakenly take when we talk about execution, you've got to start at somewhere that is similar to where you've been so that you can actually learn to drive progressive adaptations.
Yeah. And so to give maybe the actual example from what Luke is saying here, I had a client come across, we're looking at their program and they were in prep and I look at their program. It was like barbell bench press, 5 sets of 10. And it was be like 10, 10, 10, 8 or something, right? Did I leave out of 10? I don't know. There's 5 sets in there. But they had like a lot of big compound movements with a lot of this written out, like 5 sets of 10. That's one where I'm almost not even going, I almost don't need yet to, I will, but look at the video analysis of how they're training because I know to do 5 sets of 10, 10, 10, your effort level is super low in the beginning. And then you also need to ask that client too, you're like, hey, are you counting these are warm-ups? Like what are your actual work sets you're counting, or are all those of work sets? In this particular case, like these were all work sets. It's getting to a weight and doing 5 sets of 10 with it. So we know, all right, that volume quality is pretty low. I could scale this person back and push up effort. And that's when we might see that volume reduction happen for that particular type of client. Also, scenario, they're in prep. And what was happening? This person's becoming a smaller version of themselves. They're not getting that hard look because there's a greater proportion of muscle being lost per amount of fat because the signaling to uphold this tissue wasn't the best, but also a lot of volume present, causing a lot of fatigue, causing issues in all other kinds of areas, sleep, daily energy. So that's that type of correction. Let's look at the other spectrum. Sean Clarita. I'm doing his training. Sean knows how to take it there. He can put effort behind a set. There's a few areas that we've been tweaking on execution wise, but for the most part, this is a highly experienced professional in training. So should I be backing way off Sean's volume or not? He has a high quality volume. So it's more so looking at areas for Sean to work within for his recovery. And so for him, for that situation, I know he might be overdoing the volume in areas where he doesn't need more growth to happen. So we're getting into a higher level individual that, hey, we only have so much volume to work within. I might need to scale back areas so I can add a little bit more into certain body parts. So that's a different kind of situation. So with Sean, for example, like his delts and arms are crazy. His back is crazy. So to free up areas for more quad, for more chest, we bring volume down and add just a little bit more in, because for a guy that executes at that level, another set or two in a workout is a big deal. It's not adding another 5 sets in. So this is when with Sean, I review his program and we have 10 sets of quad work for the week. We're going to go to 12 sets for the week and we're going to ride that out. Then we're going to assess it 7 weeks later, and then we're going to rinse and repeat that. So that's just the 2 different scenarios of the assessment piece that I wanted someone to actually have a takeaway from of when you might be shifting volume and assessing the quality of that execution to then kind of pick what route you need to go from there.
Yeah, and I wanna get into the quality of the execution piece because I think there's a couple sides of the spectrum that are getting misinterpreted when we talk about this, and I want to kind of make sure that I'm very clear. The point in execution work is to get someone to being as productive as possible, as fast as possible. So I'm gonna give you a couple examples to kind of walk through this. When we look at injury profiles and we're fixing execution around injury profiles, one of the biggest things I see is, I'm not squatting, so I'm obviously going to be limiting my ability to progress my legs. And we might find that injury profile that's keeping someone from squatting has something to do with a movement quality perspective. So while we're fixing that, I'm going to be writing sessions that allows this person to click their brain off, focus on control within the patterns that allows them to get to full range, load lengthen, load mid, load shorten, and be as productive as possible while I work on fixing some of the things over here that may allow them to squat again. And then on that flip side too, we also need to understand that when we fix execution, we need it to stick. So another example of this would be the person that comes in with a high level of experience, thinking they know training, but they're coming to you to solve the problem of the weak body part. When you go through and fix all of the execution in order to allow for them to be able to, at some point, hopefully click their brain off and just train, their potential for reverting back to old habits is extremely high because they have a high level of experience. And so there's people that may fix it on the initial weeks, but then revert back to old habits over time. That's not actually fixing the quality of the stimulus. And this is a couple places that I think we miss the boat on quite a bit, is because we get obsessive over a certain pattern that has to be in the program design, or we get obsessive over old habits, or we forget to follow kind of the process of sending check-ins for the body parts that we need to improve in regards to training footage. And I just see it missed so much because there's so many people that come to us to fix problems that are keeping them from winning on stage. And then we lay out this process, and there's certain aspects that aren't executed on in order to actually fix what's driving the core stimulus of hypertrophy, which is training. And so it just irks me so much because there's so much that can be pulled out on that portion of it that needs to be addressed, so detailed.
So what's your application for someone listening that has the weak chest? Let's say weak chest. That's my weak point. And they want to apply what you just said. What are the things that they can put in place that they may not have that they can take away and do right now?
So the first thing I would do is download the video analysis guide from level 1. I'd walk through like all the angles that you're going to be taking training footage from for different body parts. The ones for chest are in there. Okay. We're going to create a standard of review, right? We're going to create a standard of assessment. From there, we're going to take the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks of the program to refine movement selection, make sure that setup aligns with our structure, and then also make sure that we're getting some of the subjective metrics right. We're getting sore after these sessions. We're getting a pump during these sessions, during the body parts that we're trying to train. We're feeling that stimulus kind of throughout the training session. Now, is pump the only indicator of progress? No, but this is a part of those initial first few weeks. We're going to keep those training reviews and the training footage, and we're going to use that once we get the execution to the level of standard that we expect. We're going to use that as our standard for every week. And the every week part's the part that I don't think people understand, is that when you have a body part that is unbelievably weak and you're chasing progressive overload in order to drive a progressive stimulus, if you don't keep that standard constant throughout, it's not going to always lead to the maximal amount of progress that you could have made. And so week 1, week 2 is create the standard, set the standard, know what it is. Week 3 through 4 is progress that standard within the volume set that you have and be able to assess how well you recover from it. Week 5, I'm going to be looking at volume progressions as long as recovery's there, performance is moving in the right direction, and we've kept the execution intact. And that's kind of like the initial process of the first 5 weeks that I walk through with pretty much everyone that has a problem in regards to training.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to today's podcast. Are you struggling to hit your peak on show day? Feeling lost in the off season? Upgrade your coaching game with J3 University. Our program covers everything from off season to contest prep to peak week, all based from real client results. Along with our comprehensive physique curriculum, you'll also get access to our 4 rooms with our J3U team to answer any questions you have, and live Q&A sessions to further your coaching and athlete experience. We are the source of education for top IFBB pros and coaches. Join us to elevate the coaching standard at J3 University. Let's get back to today's podcast.
I think another, one that I pulled out from there of like trying to get your setup right to feel this connection or make sure you're distorting this muscle to some degree, right? How, what makes a good exercise? Well, one you fit in, you align with, and something in that muscle should be happening, right? If you leave a chest press and your triceps are pumped, you're probably not doing a lot of chest, and you might need to reconsider your exercise choice. But one thing that I found, and to my mistake, is like I do this incline bench setup, right, for a single arm pull down. I've done it, and then I come back to set it up, and I get my incline bench and I get in it and I'm like, why does this not feel the same? And I look at my notes and it just says incline bench pull down. I'm like, okay. But what was my cable on? What was my bench on? I can't remember. So your takeaway here to apply is that any of these setups that you do that you finally connect with, write it down. This is in my notes. I use notes on my phone and just copy paste up like my workouts, right? So now on my incline bench pull down, I have noted incline bench hole 7, pulley setting 19. And those are my settings. Don't copy paste them. But now I have my setup already written down of what I do. So any of those like bench heights, cable setups, like note them down when you find something that connects well, so you can actually remember them, and then be able to be repeatable. So if you're not doing that, take that away right now and start writing down your setups. And then I think on that too, with Luke's point of like doing video review, is like save that video, make sure you have it in a good spot when you finally find on that chest press, like you have that right hip position and arm path. You're like, oh man, finally that's nailed. If you have that videoed, you can always compare back to that now. And so a few weeks down the road, we're like, man, it just doesn't feel the same. I've had that happen. Like it feels off now. What's going on? I could compare back to that on the money video and say, oh, okay, that's it. Like my hips have been shifting out further, or I've been like now like really tucking down, digging down to do this chest press, or something's changed. My breathing mechanics, I'm now pulling my chest up, or whatever it may be. So I think those two actions are good takeaways for trying to standardize the execution and even give you some problem solving along the way when things aren't working well anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's so important because with a lot of us that have a passion for training, like I know both of us have fallen victim to this. Is like you can get pretty amped for sets sometimes when you're in that like pretty highly motivated prep scenario and you're going in and you're like, I'm going to get better today. And you might progress the book, but it might not feel the same. And then you go back and review and you're like, this is not the same set or not the same rep. This used to happen to me on squatting. I'd get like really amped for a squat set, and then I would cut something in regards to kind of like the descent or the breath cycle or something along those lines, and it would change the actual stimulus that I would get out of that. And then on top of that, because it's something as big as squatting, I'd probably drive more fatigue getting that amped alongside less stimulus. So I was making myself even more inefficient. These are the things I wish I could go back and change, right? Is like the objectivity with the process. It's like if I could go back and change one thing, it's like learn to be as objective as possible by creating systems around how you take execution to failure so that you can, one, assess what kind of failure it is, like John pointed out in the beginning, but two, also be very, very tightly monitoring how well you recover so that you can take volume escalations when it's warranted and you fixed all the baseline things of the pyramid. And that's what I refer to this as. Like baseline pyramid stuff is setups, execution, quality of stimulus, and recovery capacity. And then that next step up is kind of moving volume metrics according to how you want to push someone forward.
And I know what we had just said around there. It seems like a lot on like, gosh, this seems like a lot to focus on, like always making sure you're connecting so strongly and it's repeatable. You're going to have bad days and bad workouts or just bad exercises some days. That doesn't mean that you necessarily even did something wrong, because we know just environmentally things shift too. So like my AC went out this weekend. It's Texas in the summer. That affected my sleep quality, which in turn affected my hydration as well. And also my training the next day. It's like, gosh, things didn't quite feel the same. Was that a training, execution issue, or more of this recovery and environmental issue that were somewhat out of my control?
Yep.
It's that. So I don't change anything. It's okay. Like, you're going to have bad days, bad workouts. Just, you have that standard of like, yeah, at some point this worked really well. Just repeat it the next week. And then if it's a pattern, then that's when you should start to be addressing these things. Now, probably to shift this also forward back into the conversation of when do I increase volume, and what if I have all these things nailed pretty good and I'm moving along, like should I move up volume? And it's there's a balance to make here. And I go back to my first point of first assess, and two, have a good assessment. You need to have done these variables pretty consistently for a period of time. And that's why I'm not a huge proponent of, weekly volume escalations, just because it creates a moving needle of stimulus and fatigue that I don't think needs to move stimulus that quickly along. And then also for a lot of people, if you have a lifestyle that maybe has a lot of shifts in recovery, like maybe one week you have extra work to do, the other next week you don't, you might have shifts in recovery that at some point the stimulus and fatigue spill beyond what you can recover from that week, and you kind of have a week where you fall short, and the next week picks up, but you're set to like escalate volume, and it creates a lot of moving parts that makes it hard to assess. So I like to hold volume pretty standard and just keep improving the quality of that volume. Then after a good block of 8 weeks, then you can review all your lifts. You can look through your logbook, like, are all these lifts trending up in the upward direction of more load and more reps? What does recovery look like? Am I recovered prior to each session, feeling fresh, and within that session, able to increase my lifts at least every other week? If yes and yes to those, this next block, looking at my visuals as I'd like to look at, and maybe body parts that are not progressing as quickly, I'd say, okay, legs are really progressing fast. Like I can visually see these things are getting bigger and the loads and reps are drastically moving up, but my push days is really not. But I feel recovered going into that session. It's like, okay, here's where we can now do something with this off of all this data that we have, where I'm like, all right, I'm going to scale back this leg training and provide more recovery resource to push day and add a little bit more stimulus in. So maybe you drop off 2 sets of leg work, quads and hams, and you add that into your push work. Next 8 weeks, then you reassess and you keep going from there. And so through this process, you're going to get really good at knowing volume allocation and recoverability, and why I would go more so in blocks than just rapid escalations, de-escalations of volume within shorter time frames. I would say at least, especially if you haven't done this before. And then once you get more advanced, by then you probably don't need to be listening to anybody. You'd have it all figured out then. But that's how I would go about assessing, volume and when it's going too far. And Luke, maybe I could throw this back to you of like, when it's gone too far and you've been doing these escalations, maybe signs of needing to pull back, and also maybe the psychology of, disillusion that you should be pulling back.
Yeah, so I want to make one point before I dive into that, because I think people forget that if you're tracking your stuff and progressing load over time, so reps and or load or both, like that's volume progressions within itself, which creates volume progressions week to week within a set number of sets. And so I think this is where people like get kind of hung up on it. They're like, but I need to keep progressing every week, like the stimulus that I'm providing or the volume that I'm providing. It's like, that's a part of that progressive stimulus that is the reason why we go about it kind of the way John just described. But kind of going into knowing that you pushed it too far. There's a few big signs that I kind of look for. So the first ones are going to be signs of deload, which are my like subjective metric skewing. Usually performance is the last one to go. If you're seeing performance start to decline, you've probably needed the deload for like a week or two in the first place. So subjective metrics that decline are going to be sleep, digestion, hunger signaling, libido. You can have like increased achiness of joints, more excessively sore going into sessions. These are like the deload signs that I start to see. Now, one of the ones that I think kind of starts to kind of really get pulled out when you have pushed volume too high is frequency of deloads. This is the biggest one. So when you have someone that you push this volume really high, it's time for a deload, you deload and you get back to that training volume and you're needing another one within 4, 5, 6 weeks. This is like one of the biggest signs that I need to kind of start to pull back. And this can happen towards the back end of off seasons quite a bit, because you're kind of wanting to try to find that threshold for someone, especially a newer client that you might not have found the threshold that they can work within. And it's okay to dial back because you're bringing someone back into what would be considered their maximal adaptable volume. So their ability to maximally drive adaptation for hypertrophy and recover from it and drive progress for the physique forward without having to take so many weeks where we're not training in a stimulus that's pushing hypertrophy forward within a deload. And so this is kind of where that needle needs to be balanced, and understand that this is always relative to how well you recover. So your ability to recover from a stimulus is relative to all these outside life variables. So food, are you in a surplus or deficit? Do you have super physiological compounds in or do you not? What does the life stressors look like? Like that's why these numbers can shift like even all season, because you might have like life changes that happen. One of the biggest ones that I remember, to give an example, is when I was at USF in grad school and working as a strength coach. It was like 4 a.m. mornings, with being at the strength room until like 4:35, and then class from like 5:15 to 8:30. And like my ability to train in that off season was just like survival of the fittest. Move into the next off season where I was an online coach full time, staying at home, do whatever I want. It was the amount of training that I could do within a week, like nearly doubled from a volume perspective. And my progress in that all season showed, not only from like a total of tissue that I accrued across the same amount of time frame, but the body composition that I managed as well. And so this is like the biggest things that I typically look for when it comes to that, when you push it too far.
I want to give some personal anecdote to, like, for myself, when I know I have been pushing it too far, and it's just subtle, and it just creeps in until you're at a place where you're just kind of progressing slow, but you're trying to make it happen. And it's just overall mood and motivation going into the session. I love to train, and so psychology is like, I'll make it happen today. Like I can do this workout and progress it, right? But in the same side, it's like I don't really quite feel like training today. And it's like a point of like I don't even want to admit that to myself. There's like a denial factor there, and also a thing that I don't want to step back
Yeah.
because I just love to train. And so it's more of this emotional drive that is just creating some, disillusion that I'm at a place where I'm just not recovering. And it's mild because I can go in and still make some numbers move. But even though it might be taking a ton of effort to do so, and this past off season, I was training 5 days a week, recovering, and then I moved to 6 days, and then I started getting stronger. And first, the 6 days is fine until you run into the issue of like not quite feeling like you want to train almost every day. And certain sessions that are, especially with the weak body part sessions, are really struggling to move. You're like, why aren't these sessions moving up? It's like and I'll give you more insight. My midweek push day, I started having a little bit of leg work the day before, which got into a little bit more leg work the day before, until like that session got pretty big, into where my next push day just wasn't really moving. And I just kept it going until finally, like, pulled gear down, went into my hold phase before this prep, and I removed that leg session. Then, what do you know? My push day started progressing, and I had gear low. I'm like, oh, I wasn't recovering enough. So, don't be a John. So just sometimes, you should, even in your off season, when you're earlier on feeling pretty good about recovery, the grass isn't always greener, and you could do more, but again, you have to be able to sustain that amount of work present. So, if you're progressing load and reps, it's like a good place to be at. More can do a little more, but also it can slow you down at the same time. So just, that's why I would say, just take your time and assess off like blocks of time before you make the change. And then also make sure it's within a block of time where the phase in the environment is the same. So if you're moving into like a growth phase and gears going up, that doesn't mean training should go up at the same time. Gear is going to drive a lot of that. So hold that. And then 8 weeks later, maybe then you assess and decide about volume shifts. Don't be like me of like, let's push up gear and we'll train 6 days a week. It's going to be amazing. And until it's not. So.
Oh man.
Anyway, I'll wrap it up there, Luke, unless you had something else to add.
No, I think it's so important to get right. Like, it's so important to get right because you can really pull out so much more progress out of someone. But if you guys have questions, like, let us know. Put it in the comments below. Like, we'll obviously have, be in there being able to answer questions or comments that you have, or just hop into the forums. We're in there helping people with their process all the time. John, before we sign off, what's the next episode we've got kind of coming up?
Yeah, progression isn't numbers, it's decisions. We're going to talk about program hopping and how to really make progressions. All right. So talk to you guys next week, and thanks for tuning in.